Hello everybody, my name is Khaled Siddiqui, and in this video you're going to learn something very important about supercapacitors. This is a supercapacitor. It's heavy as a rock, and boy is this thing powerful. I'm going to tell you the applications, and I'm going to tell you how to put balancing circuit to these supercapacitors. These supercapacitors must have a balancing circuit. Without that, the capacitors will have different voltage on each capacitor that are in series, and it could damage the capacitor. So I will also tell you what the applications for these are, where do they use these, and this particular one that I'm using or working on is a Maxwell capacitor bank, supercapacitor bank. That is, actually they call it ultra capacitor bank, and there's a Nesscap, and there's so many different brands, but Maxwell is one of the top brands, and I will tell you how this one is wired and why do we need a balancing circuit. This is a balancing circuit, and I'm going to tell you why we need it. Alright, let's get started. So this is how this unit is welded together. This is laser welding. It's a very powerful and low temperature welding, so high temperature cannot be used here. You can't use like arc welding or gas welding because you will damage the capacitor. So this is all laser welding. These come like this. They come welded together from factory, and I will tell you exactly the diagram how this is welded together. This way you know what the total capacitance is, because this is welded together in parallel and series, and I will tell you how the total is calculated. Okay, so let me first tell you how this is welded. Okay, so this capacitor bank is welded the following way. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have okay, so this is how these are welded. Each one of these are one capacitor, and this is plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, plus minus. So this minus comes plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, plus minus, plus and minus. Each one of these capacitors are 3000 farads. Each one of these are 3000 farads, 2.7 volts. Okay, now this little circuit board is designed for 3000 farad 2.7 volt capacitors, and each one of these is for one bank. This is for this bank, this is for this bank, this is for this bank, this one is for this, and that. The way it works is that it keeps the voltage leveled on all capacitors. It's very important that the voltage needs to be kept leveled, otherwise the voltage on a single capacitor could increase and it could explode, or it could get damaged, and it could damage the other capacitors that are connected in series or parallel and what have you. So that's why this is so important. You already know, I mean, if you're watching this video, you have some electronics knowledge to know that the capacitors total capacitance equals to 1 over C1 plus 1 over C2 plus 1 over C3 and so on, and that's 1 over capacitance total. And if you inverse that, all of this, you will have this one C total equals to 1 over all of these values and what have you. I mean, I'm not gonna teach the mathematics part of this, but I'm gonna tell you how to solder this to the capacitor. This particular unit is designed for up to 6 capacitors, but it could be 6 banks, I mean, but it could be 2 banks, 3 banks, 4 banks, 5 banks, up to 6 max. That's what this is for. Okay, so that's what that was that. Now you know how this is basically wired, or I should say, you know how this is soldered together. And now we will solder the board. Okay. Now, in order to solder the board, I took the shell out of this. There was a shell. This is the shell. See this right here? Let me get this shell. This is the shell. I took it out so you can see how these are wired, basically welded together. But actually, I'm gonna need to put back in the shell when I do the soldering of this unit, because the shell always need to be in there to keep the capacitors from vibrating or coming loose. And these are used in solar powered power supplies, like homes that have solar powered. They can be used for vehicles as starter help if the battery gets too weak in the winter time. So they use super capacitors in series, in parallel with the battery. It will provide substantial amount of boost, and the unit, the vehicle starter will turn on very easily if it has a super capacitor instead of a battery. Okay, so now let's put this guy in place, and there we go. Actually, you know what, let me get a plier to push these up, because that's where my wire is going to be soldered to. So I'm going to push these up. This is a heat sensor. You don't need to worry about that. That's a heat. You have nothing to do with that. Those are for much more complicated circuits to use the heat sensor. So we are not using that. Okay, so these are all the soldering points. So we have 1 soldering point, 2, 3, 4. This and this and this is in the same circuit, this and that. Okay, so let's look at this side, the opposite side. And from here, if you see, we have 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. So this one is plus, this one is minus. So if you look at this, right here, you see it says plus. Let me get this closer to the camera. You see right there it says plus, this is minus. So this goes to the plus, to this guy. Okay? What we need to do is we need to look where this is. So this goes right here, right? This goes right here. So this is where this will be soldered to, the red one. So let me get some soldering wire. This is soldering wire, and let's put some solder here. 1 second. Okay, so I had to use a different type of solder because the other one had, this one that I used originally had higher temperature of melting temperature. This one is much easier to solder with. Okay, so I'm gonna heat this up. Always use soldering paste. It's always a good practice to use soldering paste. Okay, so there goes my positive point. Alright, what is after the positive point? Let me show you in the diagram. So what I did is I soldered this point. Let me use a different color. This is where I soldered. This is where I soldered. Now I need to solder the second one here. This is the second, this is first, this is the third, this is the fourth, this is the fifth, this is the sixth, and this is the seventh. That's where we solder. So if you look at this board, where's the board? It has 7 wires. Okay, so where does the second wire goes? It goes to terminal 2, which is the other side of this capacitor. This is plus, so it goes to the minus. So this is my capacitor. There are 2 in series. These 2 are in parallel. These 2 are in parallel, but they're connected in series. So I have to put my second wire to the other side of this. We have to flip it. And I'm going to tape this right here because I don't want to damage this by going back and forth. So I'm going to tape this. This is temporary tape, just so that I don't damage this. And I'm gonna go with the second wire to the back side of this capacitor, which is this guy right here. It's actually 4 capacitors, as you can see here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a junction of 4 capacitors, 2 minuses, 2 pluses. And that's this guy, this point. Okay, let's do this. You have to really heat it. That thing is not easily soldered to. Let's... there you go. So we heat it very well so that we are able to solder to that thing. It's not an easy task to solder to these little points. You have to really... my soldering iron is at 800 degrees. And you have to go that high. It wouldn't work otherwise. Okay, so that solder is too dry. It doesn't have paste, and I'm gonna put a paste so I have a nice and round and solid connection. So that's my second point. Okay, now where will my third wire go? My third wire will go here, which means the other side of these 2. See, this was the first one. This was the other side of these 2. Now the third wire goes to the other side of these 2 capacitors, which are these 2 capacitors, these guys. So the other side of these capacitors are this, junction, which is 4 capacitors, and that's where I'm going to solder it to. Okay, let's get this thing soldered. And we are going to heat it up, make sure we have a nice and hot connection. The worst thing you can do is cold solder. Cold solder will get loose, and it will, once it gets loose, it will get disconnected and you'll have all kinds of problems. And the third wire, let me show you. The third wire is blue. See, blue wire, and that's where this guy is gonna go. Okay, so this is the third wire. We connected this one. Now we have to connect the number 4, which is the other side of this. Actually, the other side of these 2. The other side of these 2 is what it is. Let's do that. And it's this guy right here. This guy. Okay. I'm going to bend it a little up, just a little bit, because the heat is being absorbed by the big plate underneath, and then if that happens, it doesn't get hot enough to get a good solder joint. That's the reason I'm going to do that. Raise it a little higher, so my soldering iron heat doesn't get dissipated in the big plate underneath. And let's see, the 4th wire is green color. See, the 4th wire is green, so that's what I need. I need the green wire. Green wire goes here. That's a cold. Do you see how the solder went this way? That trailed as I removed it. The solder trailed. That means it doesn't have flux. You have to put enough flux so it's a nice and round joint. That's not the best soldering, but it's good enough. Okay, so now we have to go to the other side of this guy. The other side of this guy. And that wire will be the yellow wire. Yellow wire will go to the other side of this guy, which is this joint right here. This joint. It's gonna go right there. But we have to put some solder in there. We have to put some of these soldering paste, and now we put the wire. Okay, now we will see the other connection goes on the other side of these guys, which is white wire. By the way, this is my 5th, so this was my 4th connection. This is my 5th. This is where this is going. 5th one. Wait, no, that's the 6th one. This is where I'm at. 6th one. Okay. So the other side is this guy right here. So what do? Is we heat it up. Nice and neat. Okay. And we solder it to that wire. That's a cold solder joint, not a good one. Okay, so that's pretty good now. Now the last one, which is the black wire, goes to the negative. That's where the black wire is going to go to, which is this guy right here, to the negative terminal. So we will prepare this guy. Let's prepare this guy. And we put our wire. Very good. So now we have successfully installed a balancing circuit to a super capacitor bank or ultra capacitor bank with the following schematic diagram. Now the total capacity of this unit is 1000 farads 16 volts. 1000 farads 16 volts. From this point to this point, it's 1000 farads 16 volts. So it's an ideal one to use for car amps. It's ideal one to use for let's say solar powered 12 volt solar panels, car vehicle starter as cold battery for winter time when the battery is too cold. And the way you mount this is you have to like fasten this with something in the trunk of the vehicle where the amp is, or in the front of the vehicle, or make a box for it if you're using it for your solar panels. Just some kind of a protection so you can fasten this, fasten it with some kind of a huge tie wraps or something so it doesn't move. And that's where a terminal wire, this is a positive terminal, this is your negative terminal, and you go from there. Yeah, so now the question is, what are the main applications for such powerful ultracapacitors? These powerful ultracapacitors are used in generator starters. I'm talking huge generators that runs a factory, like diesel generators and what have you. It's good for their starters. It's good for car amps that are over 1000 watts. Now, you've seen capacitors that they're selling in the market for your car amp. Those capacitors are actually a joke compared to this. That's capacitors that they're selling for 2 farad, 3 farad, 10 farad. This is 1000 farads. I mean, this unit is so powerful that if your car is kicking the bass, the speakers are kicking the bass to the point that it will shatter your vehicle's windows, this can handle it. And it will not bring pressure to your vehicle battery or alternator. This can handle that kind of power consumption, 1000 watt. So there you go. That's something that comes in handy, and I hope you learn this. And these, by the way, the board, the balancing board, let me show you the balancing board here. The balancing board is sold separately. I'm going to leave the links in the description where to buy the balancing board if you already have this capacitor bank, or where to buy the whole thing as a unit complete like this, or where to buy just the capacitor without the balancing board. So you will have options to do any type of a purchase. I'll leave the links in the description. Okay, thank you for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe.